All right, I'm gonna get into it. So uh, I think most of us are probably familiar with Sketch in general. It's a UI UX design tool. It's one of the I think one of the original ones that's really focused on UI. There are a lot of them in the market now, but I'm very biased towards Sketch. I like it a lot. I think it's really easy to get going. And build UIs, as well as being complex and powerful enough, flexible enough to work at scale. So one of the new features in the latest version of Sketch is this feature called Assistance. So it's a pretty new feature. This is just the Sketch website on it. So it's sketch.com /extensions/assistance. But if you go to like the main page, you can find it right here. Um, so basically, assistants are sort of a light way of having control over your design files. You can use already created assistants, which are basically a collection of rules. Um, or you can even create your own. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to actually walk through creating a new one from scratch and show you one that I've built just for fun. Um, but they're sort of like plugins in a way, but they're constantly looking at your file and constantly checking all the rules. So as you're going through your design, if you, for instance, are not following the standard naming conventions of your design team or your design system, you'll be sort of alerted. You'll get a little warning, and you can use them for a lot of other things too. So I'm just going to pull up here sort of a design file. This is just one I got off of um, SketchUp sources resources. So I just pulled this one off. It's just um, a simple template for these new iOS app clips. So it's just the app clip on a few different screens. Um, it's pretty straightforward. This isn't something I made, just something that's free to download. And so assistants live up here. Um, this is the like assistance tool, and it's sort of a similar UI to like your plugins or other menu items in Sketch. And in this file, we currently have no assistants, so we get this little message here. Um, so we can actually add an assistant. So these are some assistants that I've downloaded. You can download them right here on this page. So you could see that there aren't that many right now since it is brand new. But you could, for instance, download the Sketch naming conventions that like the actual internal Sketch team uses. So they've created this assistant, and you could just download it. And when you download it, you add it here to your uh, to the available assistants. So one thing to keep in mind with assistants is that they are project specific. So you can install them and Sketch will be aware of them, but they won't be turned on for your specific Sketch file that you're working with unless you go in and manually turn them on. So if I were to like turn on the naming conventions, so this is the naming conventions assistant used by the Sketch design team, and a save. So now I see that like I've got in my general, all my assistants, I've got seven problems. So and I could see they're all coming from this one assistant because I only have this one assistant. But you could see like exactly where they are. You can click it and it takes you to them. And you can see sort of like what's wrong. So The rule that's broken here is artboard name should start with numbers followed by a space. So if we look at the artboards over here, we can see that none of them are actually following this convention. Same like with this one is a group name should not be default, and the page name should start with an emoji. Um, so that's kind of cool. So we could actually go in and like change this one to just a random emoji. And I think, oh, I need to, yep. And so that rule now is fixed. So now I have 6. So you can sort of see how these work. One of sort of like the memes you might see if you're Googling sketch assistants right now is that everyone has like the uh, as soon as they start using the assistants, they'll get like these 99 plus problems. So we might be able to see that here. So if I load up like all these assistants and they all start running, yeah, I've got like 42 issues. So some of these, like if you're just using the general assistants that are open for anybody to use off the assistants page, they might be not so relevant for you. Like, so maybe your design system or the designers you work with, you don't really care about having the sketch internal design teams naming conventions. So you might not care about that rule and you might not want to have that rule. And so that's the basics of what assistants are. Um, does anyone have any questions now before I go into uh, sort of uh, like showing how to build one?
I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
Cool. So these ones that we get to download from Sketch, do you get to change the rules and make your own, or you then have to develop your own assistant?
Yes. I'm just going to take all these off for a second. So what Sketch is trying to do with these is have it be as open and collaborative as possible. They are written with code. So if you know JavaScript code, so I'll show it a little bit later. It's not as daunting as it might seem. But you could go in to this, and I think if you click on repository, it will take you to GitHub, where the actual files for this are. And so let me show you where. I haven't actually looked at this one. I think naming conventions was the one. So let me make this bigger. So these are the rules for the sketch naming conventions assistant. So like this one that we have here. So you can see like the artboard name should start with numbers followed by a space. Should probably be, yep, right here. So it's the rule title. Artboard name should start with numbers followed by a space. And so you can see sort of like these rules are generated here. So what you could do is that you could, if you're comfortable with writing in JavaScript, you could go in and create your own rule, or you can tap on the shoulder of a developer friend and have them help you do it. But I think all of the ones here are open source, and they try to push all the developers to write them and post them in an open source way and on GitHub. Does that help explain your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Um, yeah, so maybe we'll dive in a little bit. Well, we had some questions about. I'm actually going to go back to this to see. So design system, better approaches and practices, shortcuts, improvements, speed up my workflow, help organize, better sketch project management. Yeah, so with these, like a way that these fit in with like better organization, for instance, in a design system, is like the naming conventions is a pretty clear use case. So going back to like the sketch internal design system and their team, what they use. So they put emojis on everything. Not this kind of emoji, maybe, but like emojis that might help quickly explain or give like a sense or symbol for what that page is about in their sketch file. Um, so things like that, naming conventions. There's another one in here that's pretty interesting. The Sketch to React. So I don't know if anyone has ever heard of Sketch to React um, or even used Sketch to React, but it's a pretty cool tool that tries to bridge the gap between design systems and design files, sketch files, and actual front end code. So if you follow their naming conventions and the way that you're supposed to structure your design files, you can actually use the Sketch to React plugin to automatically generate a front end React code from the design files. And so where their assistant comes in is it's always checking all the naming and on the document structure of your design files to make sure that as you're writing it, or if you're trying to apply Sketch to React to an already existing sketch file, it will point out exactly all the areas that you need to change in order to make it work seamlessly. So if you're using a tool like that, it's a really good use case because you won't be trying to figure out like why something isn't working, or when you're handing it off to a developer, why they might be having problems with it. You could sort of just, as you're working through it, have these assistants letting you know about what might not be exactly the right convention, um, as well as like the whole organization of the sketch files. Maybe you work with other designers, and it's a very good idea to have like a base level agreement with the people you're working with about how a file should be organized, or even how an artboard should be grouped, and all those details, organizational details. So an assistant would really help there, where you could just codify what are the rules here, how does this need to be structured, how does this need to be named, and you don't need to like go back and forth. You actually have an assistant there that's sort of like the arbiter of truth, and telling everyone as they're working through things that, hey, maybe you should be naming this in a different way, or structuring this file in a different way. Um, yeah, and better approaches and practices. So even if it's not an internal, um, like an internal assistant that you're using that's based off your own rules, trying to use some of these rules, like the more general ones, like accessibility. So this is making sure that you have a proper color contrast, for example. So without having to use like a plugin and manually running a plugin over your designs, just as you're designing, you can have this assistant attached to the file, and it's always looking as you're changing anything, and then alerting you within like 1 or 2 seconds that, hey, you're not being compliant uh, with like accessibility standards. So there are a lot of really good use cases for that. Even externally like this that will help you have a better approach to your designs. Shortcuts, yeah, I mean, these can definitely help with like checking your files and making sure you're doing things in an optimized way. I think that there will probably be, since it's the very first generation, there's probably going to be a lot of new cool things coming to assistance that will help you go faster as well. Yeah, and then for better project management, again, like having this automatic control over it can really help. Yeah, so I'm gonna walk through like actually making one. I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to close that out. So I've created a sketch assistant that it's very simple. This is, I don't know if it's actually useful for anybody, but it was a really fun way for me to learn how to make an assistant. So this is a really simple assistant that will check if your design file is using gender neutral language. So the first rule basically is going to test whether or not you use the word man in any of your in any of your copy text anywhere in your design file. And then same with woman, and then it will suggest that you try to change it to like a more neutral term like human. So it's very simple, and it was actually really easy for me. I have a developer. I'm a full-time developer, so it wasn't too difficult for me to get going. And a lot of the way that Sketch has organized this on the code side is they've made it very easy, and they use a lot of best practices for developers to make these. So I'm just going to pull this up. Yep. So I've got this test design file. So in this design file, I've got obviously the word woman here, the word man. But I've also got the word like human, which has man in it, but is not something that we'd want to catch with this. And then things like mankind, womankind. So that's our test design file. So we should be having errors, right? So we have here, and it's selected the text element here that's violating this rule. Same with this one. So the rule is text should not contain man, text should not contain woman, and text should not contain a male emoji. The male emoji one doesn't fully work right now. It's actually really quite difficult for me to figure out how to capture all of the male emojis easily with code, but that's sort of like the next step for this. If anyone would ever find this assistant useful. But so I'm going to set this to the side and just sort of walk through the code. So here we are in the code. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So there are a lot of colors here and a lot of things that might not make sense right away. But basically, we create our man rule. So the rule that checks to see if any of the text contains, any layer in your sketch file contains the word man, and not any like words like human or mankind. That's all here in the highlighted code. And really the thing that's checking all that is just this one line here. So in this code function here, we are creating a new rule. We're bringing in some utilities from that Sketch provides to developers here. And we're saying that this weird thing here is just saying that if you see the text man, but by itself, not followed by any other words, but it could be the end of a line, that's what we're looking for. And so for every layer in our design file, we want to pull out the value of the text. And then if the word man is in there, then we are going to report to the user, hey, this layer contains the word man. So it's pretty straightforward. We're calling this specific rule, we're calling it the man rule within the Sketch gender neutral assistant, which is the assistant that I've made. And we then say that the title of this rule is the text should not contain man, which is what we see in the sketch file. So I'll bring the sketch file back here. Text should not contain man, which is this right here. And then down here, we are saying we are just sort of packaging up all the different rules that we might have created with our assistant. And we are exporting them as the Sketch gender neutral assistant. Any questions so far? I know it's probably a lot. I know there aren't a lot of other developers here, so I might be going way too fast through this. All right. So I'm gonna just continue. So one of the ways actually, I think I'm going to just show first how to export this rule so you can bring it into Sketch. So what you do, if I remember, is you need to create an archive. And I've kind of, is a documentation on the Sketch website. Ah, yes. Let me bring this back up. Yes, so if you want to build your own assistant, you can follow the documentation here on the Sketch website. So they walk through everything. If you're not a developer, it's kind of a cool way to learn because they give you like a whole project structure and they tell you exactly like where you need to go to change stuff, and they give you like a already done sort of project that you can then just go in and change what you want. And they have step-by-step rules. I highly recommend, if you know a JavaScript or TypeScript developer friend, if you're not comfortable with the code, that you ask them to help you out. But yeah, it is pretty quick just because of all the best coding practices that Sketch has followed with this, and the developer experience is really good. So where is I'm just trying to find the export. I can't remember what the actual export command is. Yeah. So you I'm going to pull this up. So this is my terminal. So this is where I can enter in commands to try to do things. So what you would do is you would be in your folder. Let me try to make this bigger too. You'd be in your project folder. So my project folder is Sketch Gender Neutral Assistant. I can type in ls, and this lists the files there, so you can see all the different files that are in there. Almost all of these files are automatically created when you copy down like the Sketch template for making these. So very, very little of this that I actually have to edit. But if you see here, this Sketch Gender Neutral Assistant 1.0.tgz, that's what's created when you run this command npm run package tarball. That's the creating of the archive for you. And I promise you, if you ask the developer friend, if this seems weird to you, they will know exactly what to do. And so what you then do, if you have like, I'm going to remove my this assistant. Uninstall. And so you can add from URL, and that's like if you're pulling it from the Sketch extension or the Sketch assistance website, you can add it that way. But if you've created your own, or someone else on your team has, or someone sharing one of these archives of their assistant with you, you would add from archive. So I'm going to do that. So I'm in that folder now where I made the archive earlier. And then I just have to select it, open it, boom, I've got it. So now my assistant is back and working again. So that's how you add a custom assistant. So you write it in code, you export an archive of that code by just running one command, and then you can just bring it into your sketch file just like that. You can also like email or Slack someone that file, that one archive file, and then they have the entire assistant as well, and they can just bring it in from this assistance menu here. Any questions about that? Oh, sorry, I've not been paying attention to the chat. On line 69 and 70. So there's a question here on line 69 and 70. Yes. The rules are set as active. Does that mean you can enable disable rules? Yes. So what you can do is you could see here, like I've actually created 3 rules. I'm just going to expand these. So I have that man rule that I walked through earlier. I also have the woman rule, which is almost the exact same thing, except it's looking for woman instead of looking for man. And then I've got my attempt at finding male emojis, which currently only checks for the male astronaut emoji. So those are the 3 rules that I've written. But as you see here in this rules here, this list here, I've actually commented out this line here, which has the male emoji one. So I'm actually just exporting these couple rules. This might be a little confusing because I think the archive in Sketch that I'm actually using for this assistant was an older version where I didn't have this commented out. But yeah, I think if you set these to false, it will deactivate them. I haven't actually tried that. We could try it though. So sort of leads to the last thing I want to talk about in terms of like the actual developer experience here. So if we go through it just the way I showed, it can be really a lot of time when you're trying to like iterate quickly through a rule. Like let's say um, you wrote a rule and you want to test it out really quickly, and then it's not quite right, so you go back to the code and you change one thing, you think that that's it, and you generate the archive again, you uninstall the assistant from Sketch, reinstall with the new archive, and then run your design file again, and it's not quite right, and then you go back, and so that cycle can take a really long time. And so what Sketch has done is they've set up this whole project and the whole developer experience for assistants to follow what's called test-driven development. So instead of actually having to go in and do that whole process where you're archiving and then uninstalling and reinstalling every time you make a slight change, you can instead write tests. So we're going to quickly run these tests. So the way they work is, I'll actually show you the folders here first. So see, where am I? Yep. So the index file here is the one that we wrote all of our rules in. The gendertest.sketch is actually this actual sketch file. And the index.test.ts is our actual tests that we're going to run. So because of the way that sketch files are actually structured if you look under the hood, they're really friendly for developers. It's one of the huge benefits of Sketch and why there's so many plugins and a large developer community around Sketch is because sketch files are so easy to work with from a developer standpoint. So we're actually able, I'm going to just run this real quick. With just one command, we can run this test file, which will test our rules against the sketch file that we have, our test sketch file. And then we tell it what to expect as a result from those tests. And then we can run this really quickly. You know, it took just a few seconds. Yeah, 2.18 seconds total to run our tests against the file. And we can see that it's actually failing. And I think the reason that it's failing is because we did deactivate on this. So you could see now, like, hopefully this will pass, but you can see like, yeah, so we passed all of them. So you can see that this kind of iterative process from the developer perspective, from like creating the rules, you could try things out and really quickly, you just run a command, takes 2 seconds, and you can see like the effects of the code changes you made. So yeah, it looks like when we set it to active to false, that it then doesn't run. So you could see in our tests, like ignore basically like lines 1 through 10. And really our main tests are just right here. So when we run this test, it's going to run over our test sketch file that we made, which is just this file here. And then it's going to expect that there's going to be a violation. And the first violation, it's kind of confusing because it's violation 0, but it's the first one. We're going to expect that the first violation of our rules, that the message on that violation is going to be a layer, a man might do this, contains a man, right? So that is, if you look here, we can see that right there. So it's running through the man test first, or the man rules first, and then it's going to go to the woman rules. And so we can see that we expect our second rule violation to be this, and our third violation to be this, and our fourth to be this. And we expect the total number of violations to just be 4. So you can really easily like write these tests, write your rules, write tests for those rules, and then just run the test command and see that all the things that you're coding are actually working as intended without having to create an archive and uninstall and reinstall every time. So yeah, any questions about that? That was the last thing I had planned to talk about assistance. So we got one here. Ted's asking, does Assistant only act as a reporting tool to give you a notification, or can it automate tasks too? For example, find and merge duplicates. I think right now they are intended to just be this light sort of notification. You could go the route of a plugin. So that's sort of what Sketch has had for a long time, is these plugins. So you can, like, I don't actually have many here on my personal machine, but you could create a rule. It would be very similar to how you create an assistant, um, in the sense that like the structure of the sketch file and code is very similar, but a plugin is a bit more powerful, and then it sort of lets you easily manipulate sketch files if you want. But you could definitely use it for finding the duplicates in your example there. But I don't think you could get an assistant to merge them. Any other questions? So, all right, since there aren't any other questions, I'm definitely going to upload this recording afterwards. And if you do have any questions that come to mind, feel free to reach out either on Meetup, or you can find me on LinkedIn. We have a group Slack as well. But yeah, I hope that you can try out this really new feature in Sketch and try out assistance and come up with some new assistants as well that could be super useful for your team and for the community as a whole too. So thank you all very much. We can stick around too if anyone has anything they just want to chat about. But
Yeah, I'm a chatty person.
yay. It's so
Cool.
weird, like not seeing any faces and just talking.
Yeah, it's late. You don't want to see my face. I was wondering, since you are a developer, I'm sort of a developer. I mean, I started with product design, did a lot of web design, and then started fiddling around with HTML and CSS. But yeah, by far, I'm not a developer, just very curious. When you work with Sketch or with designers, do you look into the naming conventions that they provide in the files, or do you just make assumptions and go on building whatever you think is right?
That's a really good question. It depends. Um, so I can give an example from my day job. So I work on a mobile application, um, and as well as a web application. And I work with designers. So at my company, I pretty much solely wear the developer hat. Everyone's free to comment on design, on product, on QA, all that kind of stuff. But primarily wear the developer hat. But I try to work really closely with designers. So one of the things that we did was basically all the other developers in the company were doing sort of like the guesswork. So they would see like, okay, this looks like a heading. I'm gonna say it's 18 pixels or something like that, or actually like the units that were on web and the units that were used in the design files were actually different kinds of units. Um, and so what we ended up doing to sort of avoid the guessing game that was going on on the developer side, which not only caused developers to sort of expend that mental energy of trying to guess and trying to make it look good, even though they're not designers and they don't have the eye, uh, as well as like because that guessing game was occurring, uh, designs didn't quite look right when they were implemented. So what we ended up doing was I sat down with our lead designer for mobile, and we looked at all the different naming conventions used in Sketch in the design files, and we did a one-to-one mapping. So I created the exact same like relative sizing of the typography for all the text elements, and we just use the same name. So when on the code side, we have all the presets that map one-to-one to the design file. And so like it could be something like heading for heavy neutral, which would be like, okay, it's a heading, it's a H4, it's going to be a heavy font weight, and it's going to be a neutral color, so like a sort of a gray in our design system. And so that way, like no one ever has to guess. And so they could, on the design side, they can use the symbols for that typography element. They just pull from that design library, pull from those, create a new screen, and then when it's exported, I can see exactly what the names are. So in that case, it's really important that we have standard naming conventions, and assistants. It just came out, but it's like a perfect use case for us. So that way, like if a designer is working on like a new screen, like just a brand new, totally new screen, and they're pulling those elements from the design system for typography, that we'll know exactly on the developer side, like which type, typography elements in our code base to use for those things.
Yeah,
So
cool.
it's really helped out a lot.
Yeah, no, it's good to see that the struggle is not just with us. And because I understand a bit of the code, it kind of feels like I should teach all the designers how to like name things properly, because it's so logical, you know, it's just simple on HTML. But of course, they are already set in their ways as well. So we try to solve that with our design system. And then we required the plugins to help us on renaming layers and stuff, because yeah, often sometimes they just like copy and paste stuff, and then we end up losing the layer names that we were kind of attached to, so the developer could inspect on abstract.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I still am yet to find a better workflow to get like everybody to speak the same language.
Yeah.
Interesting to see how you guys did this one-to-one mapping as well.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to empathy, like cross-functional empathy, I like to call it. But it's just like we had a meetup, like I think our last in-person meetups like half a year ago or so now, where we had about 50-50 split of designers and developers come to the meetup, and then they teamed up, like one designer, one developer on a team, and they got assigned to make like a candy shop web page, like the landing page for a candy store, and the designers had to, or the developers had to do the design work with the designer like helping them, and the designers had to do the coding work with the developer helping them. And it really helped a lot. I think those kinds of exercises can really help. And then there's
Okay.
yeah, of course, there's like developers are also like arguing against each other all the time too about like what to do, and yeah, it's always politics.
Yeah, that's true. Comes down to human beings.
Mhm.
I
Okay, I
think that's
got.
really interesting. So, Eric, hi, new person here. Um, so at where you work, then developers, do they have access to like the actual sketch file, and they actually use the sketch file as reference, or is it only the designers who really have access to Sketch?
uh it's mostly just the designers, so i'm not I'm like the weird person that will sometimes ask the designer for the sketch file. But usually the standard flow has been workflow has been like more of the handoff. So like uh, design will make design and sketch, export it to InVision, and then like hand it off. So like in our Jira ticket, it will be like a link and a screenshot of like the InVision prototype. Uh, I find that like just because I'm very comfortable working with Sketch, so I find it's like more difficult for me to actually look at the InVision than it is to just look at the sketch file most of the time. But yeah, it's mostly handoff. I think that's where the problems come in, though, is through the handoff and not like everyone sort of like jamming together a little bit. I don't know.
Right. We where I work, we follow a similar process, except a lot of our stuff is exported to PDFs and attached to the Jiras that way.
Ooh.
And
That sounds
the
worse.
problem is yeah, we're trying to move right now actually to doing Sketch for Teams instead. That way the engineers can actually use the inspector to actually like see the layers and read the names of things and whatnot. So that's one of the things I was wanting to learn about with this with assistance is really about like standardizing like naming conventions and file organization with them, because soon our engineers will be able to see all the mess in our files.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for that we use abstract. Our company found that it was a good enough tool because you don't have to buy the seats for everyone to be contributors. So it also works as a versioning control for the sketch files. And everyone else you can just invite as a guest. And I think they don't require a license at all. And the guests can inspect the files and see all the details of layer names. But I agree with you, Eric. Often it's more of a hassle to look through these tools that just print out the sketch file than actually just go through the sketch itself. But yeah, not everybody has sketch on their computers either. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's the hardest thing. A lot of the times it just comes down to, we've had engineers, we've had solution designers who want access to Sketch, and it's just like, yeah, company doesn't want to pay for the license for that, and that's why.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, Thais, about like abstract's a really good tool because you get that inspector and you get the version control. Um, yeah, Sketch for Teams is newer. I've been pestering our design team to try to embrace that a little bit, because I think that, like you're saying, Nick, about like people can go in and inspect that as well without having to. I think only the designers, actual people who want to change the files, have to have a Sketch license.
Yeah, yeah.
New person here. Hello.
Cool.
We used to use InVision, and about a year ago we switched to Marvel. And one of the main reasons was that you didn't need to pay for a seat for the developers to be able to inspect the files. So we've had a lot of success with that. The only problem is that as designers design, they just group things and do everything so fast that they don't group correctly or name things correctly. So once you're inspecting them in the handoff tool, the spacing is all wrong, or at least the number that shows up is wrong. So sometimes we've run into issues with, because I also code, I design and code. But depending on the developer, sometimes they just take whatever the number that shows up in handoff, and that's the spacing, instead of just kind of being like, okay, this is not 10 pixels, it's more of like a 52 because of line height and everything else that ends up impacting the spacing. So there's like no perfect tool that I have found, but the design team definitely does hoard their files, and also there's the licensing issue as well for a company. So, but since I do both, I actually get to have access to both. But yeah,
I guess that's where the assistant kind of is a good option to have, because it's pretty much like having unit tests within Sketch and then preventing designers from doing these things. And there's just gonna have that little notification there for you saying like, hey, names are wrong, you're not following the conventions. But it kind of seems like it also depends on having a lot of setup work, because I thought it would be great if it was just magic, right? If they just provided like an entire design system checkup, and I would like, yes, I want that. It kind of looks like I'm gonna have to make it my own.
Yeah, there's some really good. There's another one that's like where did I go? That like will alert you. I wonder. Yeah, the reuse suggestions. So this one's really cool. I think another one that could be really useful for a lot of what we're talking about here, where like if you're using similar styles in two different components in your sketch file, it will like say, hey, you should be using like a symbol, or hey, I think these two things are really similar. Maybe you should create a symbol for it. But I think that might, like what you're talking about, Agni, about the not like designers might be using like non-symbols or something like that, and like one-offs instead of reusing stuff. There's another thing. I don't know if it's public knowledge yet, but I'm just going to drop it here. In Sketch 69, the next version of Sketch, I think the beta might be out right now. They're introducing a new feature called is it design variables or component variables or something
like that. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so I think slowly, like one step at a time, it's like getting closer and closer to like the perfect control over design files as well.
Yeah,
so
one of the biggest problems that I run into with designers is their use of colors. They're all over the place, and so having the variables would be very helpful. And also for communicating to the developers that this is just a variation of the main color, and my dream is to be able to just also be able to attach a like a collar function, like a SAS color function,
Mhm.
to those for the developers, because I think that would be great.
Yep.
Yeah, colors was a pain for us in a design system point of view, and we started off with having as an artboard symbol, but that gave a lot of problems throughout the components. And then eventually, when they included on Sketch, I can't remember the version anymore, some newer options for like typography with colors, we adopted straight away. I think, yeah, colors became a style. So before we were just making it as a symbol, and then it became a style. But we were very strict with our designers that they can only use what we provide them from the design system library. So fortunately, we're able to manage this differences. Like they don't use anything that doesn't exist also in code. But yeah, it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of discussion, and we talked about colors so much that it's just it gets tiring.
Yeah. It's especially really powerful if you have like variables both on the code side and the design side that like after a couple of years when the company or product decides like no our brand color is not going to be that green, it's going to be this slightly different green, then like all you have to do is update it in one place and it's updated across all the designs and all the code.
That's the dream.
If only it worked out that way in real life, right?
Yeah, no, but it seems like with this latest version, they are like trying to solve at least the color problem.
Yeah.
For me, typography is still a very big issue as well, because we have just so many symbols to make each style possible, when in code is just like 3 classes on the same HTML element, you know.
Yeah.